It's Friday, baby, and that means Invisible Walls, and this is one monumental episode of the show, episode 50. Probably should have had something special to rock this thing out. Probably should have done something to commemorate it. Unfortunately, we're in the throes of GDC, so we're just trying to get this show done for you guys so you have something to listen to while you wait for next week when we go back over the show and talk about the winners and the losers. However, we do have an awesome show for you today. Pete Wannett is back on. Today he's going to talk to us about his game Wanted. He's also going to wax and poetic on a number of different video game topics. He's a great mind and a great voice. Welcoming him to the show. All right, also sitting in on the show today, we have the indubitable Marcus Beer. I'm not even sure if that's a word. I may have just made one up. We have Brooks Huber sitting in, Ryan Stevens, and Justin Spear. And tonight on Game Trailers TV at 1 a.m., we have an exclusive inside look at BioWare. We're going to get all the details on Mass Effect 2. Also talk to them about their upcoming RPG, Dragon Age. Definitely good stuff. The crew went up there and froze their ass off for like 3 days in Edmonton. I think it was like 2 degrees, and they had about 4 hours of sunlight up there. So they definitely paid their dues for this show. You guys should check it out. Lots of good stuff.
I came for the loon, not for you, asswipe. But now, I'm gonna kill you, just for fun.
All right, first up, we are going to talk about Wanted Weapons of Fate. Now, Pete, how long have you guys been working on this game now? Because obviously you were working with it while the movie was being worked on and it was released. It's a little bit past the movie now. How long has it been in production?
It's been in production probably, well, I came aboard last December, so almost 13 months I've been on it. It was in production prior to that as well. And really had left Vivendi and went to Universal because one of the things I'd started in 2001 working for Universal Interactive, and that's where we did The Thing, and then eventually Riddick and Scarface, and had took a little break in there to go to Warner Brothers, but had come back to Vivendi when Vivendi was no longer part of Universal,
right.
And really wanted to, after Vivendi was done, to get back to sort of closer to the movie side of things, but not to work on movies, obviously, but to work on games based on movies. And Universal, obviously, I mean, Marcus and I were talking about it before the show. Universal has just a stunning catalog of amazing properties and so many things that have been done in video games well, and a catalog of opportunities there to do other games. So it seemed like a really good fit, especially for the fact that it was a great way to leave Vivendi, but to still get to work on Riddick and Scarface and Thing and all games I've done in the past.
Which is quite a resume, I might add.
Yeah, thanks. For us, it's all about the property, and I think Wanted was a case of we felt like, hey, if you saw the movie, you see where Curve Bullets immediately translates into a gameplay mechanism. But there were so many aspects of that movie that were just sort of perfect for a game, and I think for us with the game we did take the movie as our main emphasis, and took a lot of that, especially from the story, to try to go back and give a prequel aspect with, you get to play as Cross and some prequel stories, and then you get the sequel storyline as Wesley. So you really sort of have like an Oreo cookie with the movie as the cream stuffing, and really get to experience those characters both prior and after, and it fills you in. And we are able to do these twists and turns with storyline, and have an attitude that really matched the comic book. If you're a fan of the comic book, you're like, the movie was nothing like the comic book. I want something closer to the comic book. The game has lots of those comic book elements. It certainly, breaks that fourth wall. It talks at the player, and does it with a lot of attitude. So it's a third-person shooter that has all of these, interesting gameplay hooks, but also has a lot of attitude and story. And I think for those people who sort of, talk about generic shooters, it definitely steps it above and beyond what's been done before.
Now, what have you done differently with your games? Because in all honesty, most movie-based games suck. But you just listed off probably 4 or 5 of the best movie-based games that have been released. Why have your movie-based games been so good where others have failed?
I think there's a combination of factors there. One, I don't think that you can overlook the fact that you're only going to be as good on your movies, on the games you do based on movies, as your licensor allows you to. So in our case, working at Vivendi with Universal as our license, or even now where we work directly at Universal on the game, having Universal be such a pro game company. I mean, they're a big movie studio. It would be very easy for them to take a lunchbox view of games as, hey, you know what? It's a consumer product. We could slap our license on it and get it out the door.
A marketing tool almost.
Yeah, and by the way, that's done all the time. And you've played a lot of bad games that are built like that.
Watchmen.
I'm not saying any names, but there are a lot of bad movie license games that, because they're treated as simply, it's a license slap. It's no different for them between making sort of pajamas or blankets or lunch boxes.
Burger King toys.
Yeah, it's the same bullshit. And the nice part about for Universal is that the executives on the highest level, both my bosses as well as the bosses on the other side of the street, the guys who run the motion picture company, they have an appreciation and an acknowledgement for games. If they didn't have that, if it didn't start from that stage, then everything you do would be hard to do. But they are willing to listen. They're actually willing to. You can go in there and sort of, you protect your title and defend your title and stand up for it, and they listen, and they really are. It's a great place to be if you want to make games based on movies, because they really treat you fairly, and they treat you as another, person within this environment that is about making fun games. And for them, they understand the story aspect of a lot of the games and sort of understand that. And so I think that we need to get better at doing those things, but they certainly having that approach. And the other thing is work with great development. I mean, if you want to know why all those games that you just listed turned out good or better than most, with great developers. I mean, the first thing, you want to make a good game, go find a good developer. Look how many movie-based games are made by really crap development teams. Yeah. So, and then the other thing is that we're willing to fight for stuff. We're willing to not accept it, put your job on the line, put the quality on the line, because if you don't, that, the Hollywood executives and the big, it's a big business, right? You got to make it out for a certain quarter. People will bully you to get stuff done on their timelines, whether the game quality is there or not. And if you really want to make quality product, you have to push back. You have to say, you know what? Nope, it's not coming then. It's not or you're not cutting our budget. And you have to be willing to put your ass on the line in order to do that. And does it always make a perfect game? Nope, but at least you had the right, methodology and attitude. And the other thing is we build games as games. Right. We don't think about building a movie-based game. How do you build just a great game? When we started working on Wanted, it was already in pre-production. We looked at the list of things that the developer was doing, in this case, Grin's Barcelona studio, and we took a pen to it. Like, no, you're not going to do that. You're not going to do driving. Not that you can't do driving. It's just if you try to do too many things, you will not succeed at any of them. Right. So get rid of them. Don't do multiplayer, because nobody plays multiplayer games for film license product. It just doesn't happen.
Not even Lord of the Rings.
No, people play the same 5 or 6 multiplayer games over and over again. They're not interested in another half-assed multiplayer game. I think that it's interesting to see what they did with the new Riddick game. And, Marcus and I were both at Vivendi for a period of time together. And, we looked at that game and worked on that game and started that game off for, the game that eventually Atari has now picked up. Starbreeze did, which is a sequel. And it's nice for us at Universal because that's our licensed property. And so we have obviously an invested interest in Riddick and worked on those properties for a long time. But like the way they did multiplayer, I thought was really smart. It was never meant to be a giant focus. It was meant to be an added content to give you value. And we talked about it in the room with meetings with production and PR and marketing, and PR and marketing, they drive feature focus. So if marketing really wants a multiplayer thing, unless you're a really tough guy and can say, hey, I'm not going to put it in there, or willing to defend your property and say it's not needed. I think in Riddick was a case where it was interesting because the first game had none. So if you were going to do it, it was a challenge to Starbreeze, and I think they responded well. And I think that content has a lot of different things to offer, and it's not focused on multiplayer. So I think it's done really well. But for the most part, I would say that movie-based games don't really need multiplayer to succeed, and nor should they have it. I was sort of bummed. I think somebody told me that BioShock 2 apparently announced it was going to have multiplayer, and I just was like, that's awful. Like those guys made a great game. They didn't need to kowtow to doing multiplayer. Co-op, sure, love co-op. Totally different. Not the same thing as multiplayer. But when you make BioShock, you don't need to have multiplayer. That game was awesome, right? So it just doesn't, didn't need multiplayer to do it. And the second one certainly wouldn't have needed multiplayer either. So
one of the things that you've worked on, and correct me if I'm wrong, but from my experience with you, was every game that you've done that's a movie game has never been a bona fide copy of a movie. It's always been a prequel or a sequel. You've expanded the story, or you've done a preface to the story. Do you think that's why your games work better than everybody else who just cuts and pastes the script in and just lumps everybody in, and you try and recreate the movie, and then you try and pad it out with 3 or 4 extra levels?
Yeah, I mean, I've said this a lot, which is to see the movie, play the movie games don't work. It's not 1995 anymore. The bottom line is, as soon as your testicles drop, you're no longer interested in watching the same story as the movie. You bought your ticket. Why bother to sort of play a game? You already know the story. I saw the movie.
Yeah.
Like, why am I replaying like the same story? Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
It works great for like my nieces and nephews who will sit and play, Tales of Despero or Finding Nemo, like something that sort of goes through the plot of the movie. They don't care because they also sit and watch the movie 70 times.
You're right.
Every time we go in there, anywhere in the car, it's like I'm watching Cars for the 67th time. Like,
they don't get tired of it.
it's like they don't. So it's having them play the movie that's
Yeah.
the same. That's perfect. Little kids don't care.
Yeah.
But as soon as trying to make games, movie-based games for a more mature gamer, like they saw the movie.
Right.
They don't need to know the ending. Like find the parts of the movie where there's holes, there's things that are missing. Or you go, I wonder what happened there. Like, what was that story? Like, side stories or backstories or prequels or sequels, whatever it may be. Find an interesting way, but don't see the movie, play the movie. Because that, and I think we talked about gamers sort of, there's some better games coming on licensed product now, and for a lot of part, there are not that many games where you do a see the movie, play the movie experience. Mm-hmm. At some point, I think I'm going to have to go back and do that just to zig when everybody else zag. Now that everybody else is going to do it this way, I want to go back and do it the original way.
Please don't.
Well, I think we might be able to do it if the property was right or it was an interesting way of doing it. It would have to be something that was really iconic and then allowed you little bits and pieces to play sections that you hadn't seen from the film. So I think
we'll see you on Shrek 4 then.
Yeah.
Now, is it safe to say you put your ass on the line to convince them to let you release Wanted after the movie had sort of went through its run?
Luckily for us, that was just not the case. Like, this game was never meant to come out with the movie. We didn't announce that we were doing a game until 2 weeks after the movie debuted. So it wasn't even a question, because if we were going to have missed the date, we would have announced it earlier anyway, and then would have slipped the date. Look, for us, it was taking the time to make a quality product that fits in nicely between the end of the movie and hopefully, knock on wood, that Timor does a second movie. We don't know that, but that's
it did
the hope
really
here.
well. So I'm
the
guessing,
movie did killer, and I can't imagine them not doing a sequel. But it's certainly our hope that they would do one.
Now, game's done. Are you happy with the final product?
Yeah, game's all done, and I think I think we're look, I'm never satisfied. I've never been satisfied with any game I've ever worked on. I always want more time, always want to do more stuff, but I think that the player, that what we gave you is an experience unlike any other game, period, because of Curving Bullets and the unique way in which we do cover, that there are things that aren't done the same way as other games have done. So I think it's an interesting perspective. I think it's soaked in attitude that really drives a lot of the story. I really love the writing. John Zerplatten, who worked with Chronicles of Riddick, he actually, his writing partner, Flint Dilley, is they had done Riddick for us, and so John was a huge fan of the Wanted comic book by Mark Millar, and we brought him in to write the story, which he sat with Mark Millar and got sign off. We walked Millar through every single aspect, every single level, told him the story, what the story on this level was supposed to convey, because the game has these sort of twists and mind in it. We really wanted to get his approval for doing this, especially since we're treading on his sacred ground with the Wanted universe. And then we did the same thing with Timor, and I think that the story for us was something that was, it felt a little bit comic booky, but the source material was a comic book. So granted, a bloody, graphic, mature, ass-raping, comic book, but it had certain elements in it that made it more mature, and hence a real desire to want to do a game, because you didn't have to hold back and you didn't have to pull any punches. And whenever you're asked to work on an IP that basically says you could take the gloves off, this was one of the first properties I've ever worked on where I said, maybe that's a little bit over the line.
Wow.
So I think that the final product is a really fun game, and it has we're talking about some of the things you can do after you beat the content, go back through and play a close quarter combat mode, which I think is one of the most fun modes that you can have in Wanted, and sort of the 10 playable skins or characters. I think there's plenty of things for players to go back and replay it. For us, I think the experience overall is a really, really good one.
Awesome. Thanks for coming by and talking to us about the game.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Ready to die?
Yikes. Don't we at least get to mate first?
I'm not that spider, Who wants to be a widow?
Now we're going to move on to GDC discussion, and we're going to keep Pete around because he's a real smart guy and he has a lot of insight I think we don't have. And
He's a developer too. Yeah, he's a developer person.
Yeah,
isn't he?
he actually is. It's your conference, Pete, or is it?
Wow, I always thought of myself as more on the publishing side, but to me, it's E3 is our conference, but really that's now sort of all about marketing.
Right.
And so really, if you really want to know the publishing side of the business, I think we prefer DICE to it. I think that's our favorite conference.
Why? Because you don't have to talk to lugs like us at DICE?
Oh no! I mean, by the way, like DICE even has now lots of people. Hey, Game Trailers was there in full force. You did a whole show. I mean, last week the show was all about DICE, and I think DICE is an important award show. I mean, I think GDC is important because it has a lot of developers come there. Obviously, it's like, how many conferences can you hear about herding cats for the sixth year in a row? But I think the biggest problem with game developers, and I think it's for the most part 90% good, but you started to see what I call the E3 creep.
Yeah. We had this discussion. I mean, when I was doing PR, I'd actually never go to GDC because no journalists would go, and it was actually a great thing for the entire development teams to go and blow off steam and talk with their peers and just come back refreshed. But unfortunately, GDC and DICE is the same way. GDC has just devolved, in my opinion, to this media circus again, where and I know it's funny because we're talking about it, and you guys are going to GDC this week, and I would much rather it if they didn't have any big announcements, if they didn't have any press, if the keynote speakers were there to talk to the development community, because I think those guys need some space away from the three-ring circus that is the media. I mean, we've got E3, we've got Leipzig, we've got Tokyo Game Show, we've got all these other shows going on. Do we have to clam in another friggin' show? And I actually blame GameSpot for this, because they were the first people to really start going in and covering GDC. They started wheedling their way in. I wish they'd stayed away, because it just they could have let the developers have their space, because I know a lot of development people who just don't want to go to GDC anymore because it's a marketing and PR circus now.
Wow, Ricardo's going to be pissed. So Ricardo's going to be pissed.
Oh, Ricardo can kiss my ass.
Well, ultimately, the publishers control it, because if they don't put anything there worth covering, we're not going to go and cover it. So,
well, that's the thing. It wasn't
can't really blame the media,
but it wasn't necessarily it wasn't necessarily a publisher-driven event. I mean, yes, publishers would send their dev teams, and independent developers would go there to talk to other people. But it started with these sites just driving down, sneaking in, and so like then PR people were like, oh well, now we have to control the story. Now we have to put these stories out there. It's like, leave the alone. Let them do what they need to do.
Where was it before San Francisco? It was in
San Jose.
So do you see them moving it to San Francisco as kind of just to make it even easier for the media?
Well, yeah, it's become a media circus. That's why it's at Moscone now, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, it had gotten too big for San Jose. The last time it was in San Jose, it was just totally overflowing, and it just wasn't a good space for it.
I remember it was in Long Beach.
Right.
2 years it
That's
was at
probably
Long
when it
Beach
was
before
legit.
it went back to San Jose.
Yeah.
But do you also think maybe a little bit of it being a little more media friendly, I don't know if that's the word I want to use, is when E3 was trying to take a kind of, it didn't really, but kind of take a step back the last two E3s? Is it maybe a response to that? Because I know publishers have been having a lot more publishing, like, gamer days and stuff like that, so maybe they're just trying to grab whatever spotlight they can get.
Well, I think a lot of publishers, I mean, we actually switched when we were at Vivendi. We did Gamers Week. For the first year that E3 scaled back, we went to Palm Springs and took a whole bunch of journalists out there, and we showed off we showed off Scarface, and we had was it Fear expansion, and we had Aragorn. That was a great game. But that was our response, and it was actually a better way to deliver a focused message as a PR person. But you take into account that we have E3, we have Leipzig, and we have Tokyo Game Show as the big three game shows of the year that the media go to. Then you build on 2 Comic-Cons, then you build on CES, then you build on DICE, then you build on GDC.
Me, we know.
I mean,
better than anyone.
It's just ridiculous, and I think it's overkill and I think now that E3 is going back to the big balls out, tits out, big pissing competition that we know and love. I think everybody else, they can scale back. GDC can go back to being about the development team because those guys need a chance to be able to talk to each other. As at the end of the day, the benefit is you get better programmers because they talk about stuff and they swap little secrets and they just get to chill, and the products are better coming out of it. They have a break away from the PR and marketing machine.
Well, the interesting thing is that it looks like they're already headed that way, because what we got today was word that the two big keynotes, Iwata-san from Nintendo and Kojima-san from Konami, you're only going to be allowed to record the first 15 minutes of each one of those keynotes on videotape. So you look back at past GDCs, the Wii Remote, brain training and the whole touch generations thing, Little Big Planet, Home, all these things that were unveiled at GDC in the past now probably aren't going to happen. So ultimately, is that a better good for the industry, or?
I think it's a better for the industry in the US. I think it's a better thing because it pushes more focus onto E3 because we have
that huge hole where there's not that big tentpole event where we can put the industry up and say, hey, look at what's coming.
But that's what E3 is going to be again this year, and that's the discussion we've had in the past where E3 for the last 2 years has been more of a hole than a pole.
But isn't the industry big enough now that we need more than one event? I mean,
you know what? In the US, for the just speaking US centric, because Japan's got Tokyo Game Show, Europe's got Leipzig. US needs E3 to be the big slapping our cock out and saying how big we are as an industry.
Take the whole
Actually, Leipzig's
and
gone
take the
now.
whole.
Now it's Gamescom.
Well, my reasoning being, and again, we discussed this after E3 last year. You could count the amount of broadcast or mainstream press at E3 on the fingers of one hand last year. Nobody was around. Nobody was interested. And this year, we're back to Booth Babes. We're back to that little bit of razzmatazz, and they will be back this year. The board, and the industry as as an entity makes a much bigger statement.
Now, Pete, I'm interested to hear your take on this. As someone who creates games, you've been working on a game for 12 months. You're finally ready to show it. The game comes out in November. It's right about now. Would you prefer to have GDC so you have two vehicles to really promote your game in the US? Or is the cost-benefit analysis not working out where you're crunching your team to get that demo done for two different shows, and that's impeding the overall progress of the game?
Well, anytime you have to stop production on your game to get a demo out, that's a big, it's a big festival. Like, people want to run around and just sort of, it wastes time out of the product. I hate doing it when I work on a game, to have to stop what you're doing on the game to make a demo for any kind of event. Like, it's easier if you can just have the code where it is and have it be showable, or try to manage it to say, hey, we're only going to show this level, we're not going to break code, we're just going to get you a build. I think that anytime you stop having the guys work on making the overall game, that hurts the game. But that's the same way for E3. In terms of GDC, the only thing that I will say that is good about it is we as an industry need to be better at being a 12 months a year industry, and that to have a space where games that come out in April, May, June have something to show, because after June then you have E3
right,
and everyone's showing their Christmas product, right? So to have something here where the games of the spring, I think the spring is sort of, hopefully we'll start to see more tentpole games release over a 12-month cycle. I think last year was just a sheer cram job of everything in the fall, and it's just like, it's painful because so many good games come out and you can't play them all. So they're games that, quality product that gets lost in the shuffle. I don't know what your thoughts. I haven't played it on like Far Cry 2, but like I really wanted to play Far Cry 2, and it just got lost for me. Not that Far Cry 2 wasn't a damn good game or a bad, I don't even know because I haven't played it yet, but it's still on my list of just things that like it just got lost in an avalanche of other stuff, and I really wanted to play Far Cry 2. I was a big fan of the first one. But in terms of the GDC stuff, I would say that, I think you need to be a little bit protective of having the developers have a conference for themselves. But look, at the end of the day, promotion for games, the more promotion we get for games, the more people are aware of games and more different types of games that are coming out, that's going to be better for an industry as a whole. So I think I'm willing to stomach sort of the commercialization of game developers in exchange for the fact that it'll promote the word of all games out there.
And at the end of the day, your checks are, a lot of them are signed by royalties and how well the game sells, and that's all about awareness. And
well, as a counterpoint to that then, you got E3, which is now the middle of the year. Wouldn't it be better for perhaps CES to have a bigger games component at the beginning of the year in January, where, then all of a sudden you've got the first 6 months covered by CES, and then you've got the last 6 months covered by E3, and then, yeah, everybody can build in the 2 breaks a year, or the one demo break, lockdown, whatever. You show one stuff behind closed doors at GDC, and then you have a big public release at E3. You don't at CES. You don't have to worry about GDC and DICE and Comic-Con and all these other things. You got these 2 events that are focused on video games and consumer electronics that get the press coverage, and then you can have your own smaller independent game days or game weeks.
There was a time when the only place that games got showed were CES.
Yeah.
And
They
then
used
it
to
got
be in
too
Chicago,
big.
right? And they said, "Hey, games are too big now. We need our own show," and that's how E3 was born. So.
Right. So a little bit of irony and the whole industry going full circle there, perhaps.
Yeah, it's interesting because I mean, if you look at CES now, they did have a bigger games presence this year compared to last year.
But 2 years ago, they had a huge games presence, and then last year it just kind of disappeared, and then this year was kind of somewhere in between.
Mid Killzone.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a big games presence, but
I mean, I think CES with games would actually outgrow Vegas, because I don't think the Vegas Convention Center is big enough to hold it. But I'm not talking about 2 E3s a year. I'm talking about something a little bit bigger than GDC and a little bit smaller than E3 in Vegas,
Just
tacked
right.
on to just right. Exactly,
Well, I
just
will
like
say-
the Goldilocks and the Three Bears.
I will say I'm glad that E3 is back to, well, not, I guess it'd be back to May, but in June, because last year it was like E3 to Comic-Con to Leipzig.
Oh,
that
in
was
like
just
a
It was
5 or
like
6
6
period.
weeks or
Yeah.
something.
It was
Like that.
brutal.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
I can imagine if you're trying to get demos ready or something like that for a game.
And we were there everywhere, right? So
But
like,
you had the one version that you were showing, thank God. But it took you out of the office for 6 weeks.
we were 6 weeks where all we did was just press and promotion and touring. Like didn't get a chance to work on the game. Luckily, I have a team of good people to work with, and that there were good people sort of in there working on the game while we were off touring. So
And you also have the world's tallest man.
we do, Mr. Ryan French. So. Ryan French, Jeremy Hibnick, and Nick Torsha, we have a production team at Universal that's really, really good, and so, we were able to sort of put a guy in Barcelona permanently to stay. I mean, Jeremy, just got back literally as the game was finishing up. We had him in
and he
Barcelona.
wants to kill you.
Yeah, for the last 7 months of the project. So, but that's important, and it keeps, tabs on your developer. But what it really does is help when, sort of one component of your production team is just doing touring for 6 weeks.
The big problem we have here is what happens if Iwata-san shows something mind-blowing at the end of his keynote. As he often does, he'll yammer on and on about, well, blah, 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 market, blah, blah, blah. And then at the end, he'll pull the magic wand out and he'll show something. We cannot...
Well,
no
I mean,
one's-
we're pushing back. I mean, we're trying to film.
And what about Kojima? I mean, what if he shows the new Metal Gear at the end and we can't... And there's no footage of that
Well,
anywhere.
Kojima's keynote's definitely interesting because the Iwata keynote's scheduled for an hour, but the Kojima one's in 90 minutes. So already it's a lot for that dude.
Now-
Unless he shows a cinema.
And if he shows a cinema, then it's only like 4 minutes worth of talking.
I hope you enjoy it.
Yeah. So, I mean,
Did you like
it's kind of odd. I'm a little nervous that we're going to end up missing something, not being able to show something to our users. We're going to have to blog about it or write about
But I think
it.
everybody's in the same boat, though. Everybody can only record the first 15 minutes. And maybe that's actually a savvy...
But that's not going to happen. There's going to be some chump with a cell phone camera, somebody with a camera hidden in their bag. Someone's going to shoot it, and what's going to happen is you're going to get this awful quality video out there on YouTube in our user movies. It's going to totally misrepresent the products. Just let us shoot it and make your game look good. It's going to get out there.
Stop everybody from shooting it. Don't put a big announcement up there. Save it for E3.
That's stupid. What if their game comes out in like November?
Well, again, they can.
Then they have 4 months to promote their game before it comes out.
Yeah, that sure worked for Prince of Persia.
When you're talking about the two people,
It didn't work for Prince of Persia.
when you're talking about the two
irony.
people you are talking about, you could have 6 weeks to promote the game, and the game would still bloody sell because whether it's Metal Gear or whether it's the latest genius piece of Wii Music 2.
It might sell. I don't know that it'll sell as well as it could.
Oh, I think given the vociferousness of the fanboys, and we know the fanboys, and we love the fanboys, that sort of thing,
The only precedent we have for that is Diddy Kong Racing for the N64. They announced that game a month before it was released. It came out. That was when there was
Blockbuster.
there was like 2 games for the N64 then. That's why that worked.
You
It's
could
never worked before.
look. You could announce it, and any PR person worth their salt would say, "All right, this is what we're announcing at E3." And if we are announcing at E3, we make sure that we've got it under embargo to all the websites beforehand and to all the print magazines, so that all the stories are hitting the same day. Everybody's got anything, and that's when it starts off.
All I know is we're going to be a bunch of salty dogs, and there's going to be a bunch of our users that are salty dogs if those 2 guys show awesome and we can't shoot it.
Woof.
Can we all agree with that?
Yar.
Break.
All right, that's going to do it for the monumental episode 50. I just want to take this moment to thank each and every one of you guys and girls who have been watching and supporting the show through the first 49 and now 50th episodes. Really appreciate you guys. Definitely head on to Facebook and join the group there. It's a good place for you guys to interact with the people on the show. Once again, don't forget tonight, Game Trailers TV on Spike TV at 1 a.m. We go inside BioWare for an exclusive look at Mass Effect 2. Once we catch up on our sleep from GDC, we'll be back next week. We'll see you then. Peace.